On a quiet February morning in Bristol, 16-year-old Becky Watts sent her last text message. Just minutes later, she was gone. What happened inside her home that day would set off one of the biggest searches the city had ever seen. Friends, family, and police were desperate for answers. At first, no one could understand how a teenager could just disappear. But as the investigation unfolded, it revealed something far more disturbing than anyone had imagined. On June 3rd, 1998, Becky Watts was born in Bristol to Darren and Tanya. Even before her birth, her parents had separated, and her earliest years were marked by instability. Becky spent her first years with her mother, but after concerns of neglect, she was taken into care. Not long after, she and her older brother Dan moved in with their father, Darren. Those who knew Becky often spoke about her personality in two different lights. Around close friends and family, she was outspoken, lively, and full of humor, never afraid to show her feisty spirit. Yet in school, she was described as quiet and reserved, though her teachers remembered her for her kindness, her empathy, and the size of her heart. She was the kind of girl who noticed when someone was left out and made sure they felt included. Becky kept a small but devoted circle of friends, and the loyalty between them ran deep. Life at home also changed. Darren began a relationship with a woman named Angie, who had a son, Nathan. In 2013, Darren and Angie were married. It was a blended family celebration. Nathan proudly acted as best man, while Becky stood as one of the bridesmaids. Alongside Nathan's girlfriend, Shauna, the images captured that day showed a family hopeful for their future. But less than 2 years later, their lives would be shattered. On February 19th, 2015, Becky was reported missing. She had supposedly been planning to meet her boyfriend that morning, but never arrived. Her father, Darren, desperate for news, turned to both the police and the public, begging for any information about his daughter's whereabouts. What struck investigators early on was the silence. Becky's phone and social media had gone completely inactive. For a teenager who was usually in constant touch with friends online, this was a serious red flag. The case quickly drew national attention. Media outlets across the country reported that Becky, just 16 years old, had vanished from her home in the St. George area of Bristol. Days went by with no contact. Detectives confirmed that she had left the house, only with her laptop and her phone, and yet nothing more was heard from her. Friends, teachers, and family all echoed the same sentiment. This disappearance was entirely out of character. Search efforts escalated rapidly. Police teams scoured nearby fields, parks, and wooded areas. Helicopters circled overhead while divers combed through lakes. Troopers Hill Nature Reserve, a local lake, and multiple homes were thoroughly searched, but no evidence surfaced. The National Crime Agency and the College of Policing lent their support, and the community rallied together. Posters appeared across Bristol. Volunteers poured out to search the streets, and the hashtag number sign Becky spread across social media, amplifying the family's plea for help. Investigators began piecing together Becky's final known movements. They spoke to those closest to her, hoping to uncover details that might explain her sudden disappearance. Her stepmother, Angie, mentioned hearing the door slam that morning, assuming Becky had left for the day. The last people confirmed to have seen Becky were her stepbrother Nathan Matthews and his girlfriend Shauna. When the pair were eventually interviewed, their accounts matched, almost word for word. Both said they had heard stomping down the stairs, followed by the front door slamming shut. They insisted they assumed Becky had left the house in a mood. To detectives, the similarity in their stories stood out immediately. In most investigations, witnesses often provide slightly different recollections, but these two seemed rehearsed. Their demeanor also caught attention. Shauna came across as giggly and relaxed, while Nathan appeared oddly detached, showing no real concern. 9 days after Becky's disappearance, police returned to the family home with a forensic team. Inside Becky's bedroom, they made a chilling discovery. Faint traces of blood on the door frame. Even more disturbing, fingerprints were found within those bloodstains. The evidence suggested that something violent had taken place inside the very home where she was last seen alive. Forensic results from the fingerprint found in the blood on Becky's bedroom door frame came back. The print belonged to her stepbrother, Nathan Matthews. Hours later, confirmation followed that the blood was indeed Becky's. With this devastating news, police knew they had the grounds to act. On February 28th, 2015, Nathan Matthews and Shauna _ were arrested at a house in Bristol. Nathan was 10 years older than Becky and had known her since she was just 2 years old when his mother began a relationship with Darren, Becky's father. The relationship between Nathan and Darren had always been strained. Nathan resented interference in his mother's life, while Becky's brother Dan often spent time with Nathan playing video games Nathan barely engaged with. Becky, he didn't live in the family home, but stayed nearby with his grandmother, frequently visiting the house. Troubling incidents from Nathan's past painted a concerning picture. When he was 19, he once arrived at the family home with 4 young girls in the back of his car, none appearing older than 12. Darren had refused to let them inside and ordered Nathan to take them home immediately. Years later, when Becky struggled with an eating disorder as a teenager, her family was deeply worried for her. Nathan, however, dismissed it callously, claiming she was only seeking attention. Becky eventually recovered, but Nathan's indifference was long remembered. In 2008, when Nathan was 21, he introduced the family to his new girlfriend, Shauna __ He claimed she was 19, but in truth, she was only 15. Darren quickly caught the lie and told Nathan to take her home, unwilling to risk his children's stability after years of fighting social services. Despite this, Nathan and Shauna stayed together, eventually having a daughter. Darren admitted he never liked Shauna, saying there was something about her he simply couldn't place. After their arrest, police carefully strategized their questioning. Forensics were also dispatched to search Nathan and Shauna's home. The property was chaotic, with rooms overflowing with clutter, yet in the middle of the mess, one detail stood out starkly: the bathtub. Unlike the rest of the disordered house, the tub was spotless, gleaming, and scrubbed clean, an anomaly that immediately raised suspicion. As the investigation deepened, detectives discovered 2 small but crucial pieces of evidence: receipts from a hardware store. They showed that on the very day Becky was reported missing, Nathan had purchased a circular, saw protective goggles, gloves, and a mask. CCTV confirmed him making the purchase. The news devastated Becky's family. Darren later said that in that moment it felt as though his world was collapsing. Flowers and tributes soon appeared outside the family home in Street Ambrose. Church opened its doors for mourners to light candles and write in a book of remembrance. Heartbreakingly, Becky's murder had occurred on her brother Dan's 20th birthday, a day forever scarred by tragedy. On March 3rd, 2015, police received a statement through Nathan's lawyer. He refused to listen as it was read aloud, covering his ears, but the words admitted his responsibility for Becky's death. He explained that he had arrived at the family home armed with a stun device, tape, handcuffs, a mask, and a large bag. His plan, he claimed, had been to kidnap Becky to teach her a lesson, believing she was selfish and a risk to his mother's health. But when Becky saw his face during the struggle, he panicked. Nathan confessed that he strangled her as she was partially inside the bag. The horror did not end there. After killing her, Nathan used the saw he had purchased to dismember her body in the bathtub, scrubbing the scene. Afterwards, in a chilling attempt to hide his crime, the spotless bathroom, the suspicious receipts, and Nathan's eventual confession revealed the unthinkable truth. Becky Watts had not run away. She had been murdered by the very person who should have been part of her protective family circle. Late one night, detectives received crucial new information. It pointed them toward a house at Barton Court in the Barton Hill area of Bristol. The intelligence suggested something unthinkable, that Becky's body had been cut up and hidden there. When officers searched the property, their worst fears were confirmed. Inside the terrace home and its garden, they found suitcases and bags wrapped in plastic and cling film. The remains of Becky Watts had been concealed with cat litter and salt in a desperate attempt to hide the smell of decomposition. Though formal identification was still pending, police immediately informed Becky's family. It was the devastating outcome they had feared from the very beginning. Police arrested several people linked to the house. 3 men and 2 women were taken into custody on suspicion of assisting an offender, while some insisted they had no knowledge of what was inside the bags. A few would later admit guilt to helping after the crime. Others would eventually be acquitted. The gruesome state of the remains revealed the calculated measures taken to conceal the crime, but the pathology report painted an even darker picture. Becky had fought desperately for her life. She suffered over 40 injuries before her death, most likely caused by suffocation as a hand clamped down over her nose and mouth. In a chilling final act, her body had been stamped repeatedly after she had already died. Becky had to be identified using DNA evidence. For local police, the case had become one of the largest investigations in their history. Hundreds of officers, volunteers, and community members had searched tirelessly, clinging to the hope of finding Becky alive. Even though Nathan Matthews had already confessed, detectives doubted he had revealed the full truth. They needed to know the extent of his girlfriend Shauna __ involvement. When questioned, she claimed she had only learned of Nathan's role after his statement to the police. She insisted she had never touched Becky, alive or dead, but investigators weren't convinced. Reconstructing Becky's final hours exposed the chilling sequence of events. On the morning of February 19th, 2015, Becky returned home after staying the night with a friend. At 11:03 a.m., she sent her final text message to her boyfriend, telling him she was listening to music. Minutes later, Nathan and Shauna arrived. Instead of parking on the road, as usual, Nathan reversed his car into the driveway, the boot facing the front door, ready to load what he had come for. With Angie away at a hospital appointment, Becky was alone in the house. Nathan attacked, suffocating her, before placing her body in the car. By 12:45 p.m., Angie had returned home. Nathan and Shauna acted as if nothing had happened. Hours later, Becky's boyfriend arrived, worried she wasn't answering. Shauna pretended to check Becky's room, while the car outside still held her body in the boot. That evening, they drove back to their own home. Inside the house, Becky's body was dismembered in the bathtub. Afterwards, Nathan and Shauna ordered pizza and Chinese food, behaving as though nothing horrific had just taken place. The following day, February 20th, Nathan purchased drain cleaner, gloves, masks, goggles, and a saw. Later that same afternoon, Darren reported his daughter missing, while Shauna even shared his plea on Facebook for Becky's safe return. Over the coming days, their actions became increasingly sinister. On February 21st, they bought bin bags, bleach, cling film, and rubble sacks. On February 22nd, they purchased more supplies, including sponges and tape. By February 23rd, police were knocking on their door, but the couple refused to answer. That same day, they searched. Find Becky Watts on Google, and within minutes, Shauna phoned her aunt, mother, someone she had not spoken to in years, arranging to visit her house. On February 24th, CCTV captured a white van traveling from Cotton Mill Lane to the location where Becky's remains would later be found. Investigators believe her dismembered body was inside that van. As Nathan Matthews continued to recount his version of events, the gravity of what he had done slowly began to show through. His original claim that the plan had only been to scare Becky into changing her behavior stood in stark contrast to the brutal reality. He admitted that he intended to bind her, silence her with tape, and transport her in the boot of his car with vague plans to frighten her further in a wooded area before releasing her. It was a twisted justification built on the belief that humiliating her would somehow force her to be more appreciative and less selfish. But his explanation revealed more than he likely realized. It was premeditated, organized, and deeply sinister. After 96 hours of questioning, Nathan Matthews was formally charged with the murder of his stepsister. Shauna, though not yet tied directly to the killing, was charged with perverting the course of justice. But investigators weren't finished. Over the following weeks, they pulled apart every aspect of the couple's lives. Phone records, internet searches, and deleted text messages began to reveal the truth. On Shauna's phone, officers recovered disturbing messages between her and Nathan. The pair had joked about abducting a young girl and hiding her in the attic. Shauna had once texted about seeing a schoolgirl she nearly knocked out to bring home. Internet searches revealed pornography centered around teenage girls close to Becky's age. The recovered evidence painted a horrifying picture. The crime against Becky was not spontaneous. It had roots in a shared fantasy. Forensics added more proof. DNA belonging to Shauna was discovered on one of the bags used to conceal Becky's remains, as well as on a mask connected to the crime. With this, the case against her grew stronger. On June 22nd, 2015, Shauna _ was charged with Becky's murder. Becky's funeral was held at St. Ambrose Church on April 17th. Hundreds lined the streets to pay tribute as her coffin, carried by a horse-drawn carriage, passed by. A white dove was released in her honor, symbolizing innocence and peace. While the service was public, her burial was private, reserved for her family. That October, the trial of Nathan Matthews and Shauna _ began at Bristol Crown Court. Inside the courtroom, Becky's family listened in, shocked as they learned that years earlier, Becky had told a friend Nathan once described to her in graphic detail how he would kill her. She had never revealed this to her family. Witnesses from Nathan's time in the Territorial Army also testified, describing a man who was moody, quick-tempered, and often isolated. Prosecutors revealed disturbing evidence that the crime was not only motivated by resentment, but also by intimate interest in young teenage girls. The court heard how Nathan and Shauna's messages and searches exposed a shared, deviant obsession. Shauna maintained her innocence, claiming she had been controlled by Nathan and feared him. The prosecution rejected that claim, presenting the pair as partners who acted together. Even Shauna's estranged mother testified, recounting how Shauna suddenly reappeared in her life after Becky's death, behavior the court saw as an attempt to establish an alibi. After weeks of harrowing evidence, the jury reached their verdict in just 3 hours. Nathan Matthews was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Becky Watts. Shauna _ was acquitted of murder, but convicted of manslaughter and kidnap. The court concluded that the two had conspired to abduct Becky in a plan driven by both malice and intimate Motivation. Nathan was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 33 years. Shauna was sentenced to 17 years. As Nathan was led from the courtroom, he could not bring himself to look at his family, instead staring at the ground. The trial left Becky's loved ones shattered. Her mother, Tanya, described the unbearable pain of losing her daughter, saying it felt like living through the worst horror movie imaginable, except this was real. Darren, broken by the ordeal, wrote a book about Becky's life. He confessed that if the punishment had been hanging, he would have been the one to pull the lever himself. Though Darren and Angie's marriage was tested by unimaginable grief, they stayed together, vowing never to let the tragedy divide them. They credited the immense support from the community who organized balloon releases, marches, and moments of silence in Becky's memory. In a local park, a small apple tree was planted as a living tribute, a symbol of hope, growth, and remembrance. Becky's story is one of profound loss, but also of the love and light she brought to those around her. Her family described her as a tornado, a hurricane, and a sunbeam all at once, full of energy, feisty, and impossible to ignore. At just 16, her life was stolen in the most horrific way, but her memory continues to live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Music. Thanks for watching Crime Scene Stories. From hidden motives to shocking truths, we uncover the darkest stories from across the U.S. If you're drawn to real investigations, twisted cases, and justice served, subscribe, leave a comment, and join us as we explore the crimes that shook the U.S.